Okay, folks, we'll call our meeting to order, and we will begin with our land acknowledgement. And it's on. I would like to begin by acknowledging that we are in Mi'kma'ki in the district of Sipekne'katik, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. East Hants further acknowledges the 50 African Nova Scotia communities whose 400-year history have contributed to the province's culture, history, and legacies. We are all treaty people. The first item and the main item on our agenda this evening is a public hearing around the East Hants official community plan update. And I would just like to welcome all the members of the public who have chosen to attend this evening. Okay, so who's starting, John or?
Well, I guess I can start. Debbie's going to take us through the presentation, Madam Warden, but I guess following a lot of discussion over the last couple of years and back and forth and a lot of research on the part of staff, we've arrived at this point with a document that I hope, perhaps not everyone's pleased with, but I think it was a good first effort for this part of the municipality. So I'll leave it at that and let Debbie take us through the presentation. Thank you.
Okay. I guess this is a public hearing, so I better follow the official script before we turn it over to Debbie. So, councillors, this evening we have one item on the public hearing agenda. The purpose of this hearing is for council to hear input from the public prior to making a decision on the proposal. To the members of the public who have chosen to participate this evening, welcome. Please note that council's procedural policy requires that you not cheer, boo, clap, or otherwise disrupt this hearing. Anyone who wants to comment or ask questions will be provided with an opportunity to do so. Tonight, council may approve, reject, or defer its decision on the proposal to a later date. Council approval is required for the proposal to proceed. I will now ask the municipal clerk to outline when the public hearing advertisements were published.
Madam Warden, a public hearing notice appeared in the July 12th and 19th editions of the Chronicle Herald. The notices described the proposal, gave the date and time of the public hearing, and indicated that staff reports were available to the public.
Councillors, the public hearing this evening is for an update to the East Hants official community plan. I would now ask the chair of the Planning Advisory Committee to present his report.
Planning Advisory Committee has considered the proposal on behalf of Municipal Council. The committee has reviewed staff reports, completed their evaluation, and will make a recommendation to Council during this hearing. Madam Warden, through you, I will now ask staff to present the final report on the proposal.
Thank you, Madam Warden. So the plan update process started in January of 2021. Comprehensive planning has to be implemented throughout the municipality in accordance with the minimum planning requirement regulations, which is a provincial document. Currently, only the southern portion of the municipality has comprehensive planning, and the northern central zones areas only have planning for large-scale wind energy events or large-scale special events and wind energy projects. Staff have undertaken extensive community and stakeholder engagement throughout the plan update process. Council has used the feedback from residents to direct the contents of the planning documents. Second reading and approval of the 2023 East Hants official community plan is now ready. So I just have a graphic here that shows our citizen engagement. So it started in April of 2021, and we sent letters to our adjoining neighbors, our municipalities and First Nations. And after that, we held a Zoom meeting with the developers, which briefed them about the plan update, and that was held in May of 2021. During the summer of 2021, we released a plan update survey. That survey was available both digitally and hard copy. And then in the fall, October, we held 5 community meetings in the rural East Hants communities that were going to be impacted. So we had a meeting in Walton, Kennetcook, Upper Rawdon, Knoll, and Maitland. From there, we took those results of the survey and of the community meetings, and then we prepared and presented background papers to our Planning Advisory Committee from the spring of 2021 to the summer of 2022, with council direction ending in the first draft of the East Hansel Official Community Plan. And that draft was presented to our Planning Advisory Committee in September of 2022. From there, we were given authorization to hold the next set of community open houses and public information meetings. And then we held those meetings in 7 communities. So in addition to the 5 rural communities, we added Mount Uniacke and Milford. From there, the information was gathered from that feedback and presented to council. And we received direction from the community and from the council on updates to the plan, and those were completed from December of 2022 to April of 2023. In May of 2023, first reading of the East Hansel Official Community Plan was given, and staff was given authorization to hold a public hearing. Once that authorization was given, we prepared and mailed over 5,700 letters indicating the proposed zoning of anybody that was in the future planned area or anybody in the comprehensive planned area that was going to have a zoning changed. And notices appeared in the newspaper about the public hearing and on social media and our website. And that was in June and July these months. And now we're here at the public hearing tonight. So since May of this year, we've had, as I mentioned, 5,700 letters were mailed. In response, staff have received over 47 phone calls. I was still receiving phone calls today. 11 emails, 4 walk-in inquiries, and 2 meetings with residents were held. Tonight's public hearing has been advertised on the municipal website, on social media, and Pam's Web, and in the Chronicle Herald. Neighboring municipalities and Sipaganagati First Nation have been notified of the final draft of the planning documents and of the public hearing. And we have had over 60 letters returned because of incorrect addresses. Property owners have moved, or deceased property owners, and staff have tried to correct the addresses wherever possible. So there have been a variety of comments, but I've listed some of the more common ones here. So the most common one we've received is, how is zoning going to impact property taxes? We've had requests for more information on the new zones and on the proposed land use regulations in general. Inquiries if new development was being proposed on neighboring lands. A couple of requests for elevation measurements. A few requests for maps. Clarification on property boundaries and zoning boundaries. Questions on the route of rivers we've identified. Questions on possible agricultural zoning in the future. Questions about lawfully existing uses, and watercourse greenback zone setbacks versus provincial regulations. So new content in the community plan document. Planning Advisory Committee has reviewed and given direction on a range of topics throughout the plan update process. Further direction on the plan update was given at the July 18th, 2023 meeting of Planning Advisory Committee to remove the Fundy erosion and Fundy flood risk overlay zones from the final planning documents. Planning documents presented tonight still have the Fundy erosion zone and the Fundy flood risk overlay zone information included in the documents, because these are the documents that were given first reading by council. If council decides to accept Planning Advisory Committee's recommendation, information pertaining to the Fundy flood risk overlay zone and the Fundy erosion overlay zones will be removed prior to those documents being sent to the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing. So now I'm just going to go through each of the new proposed designation and zones. So the first one, and the one that will that takes up the majority of the northern and central portions, will be the Rural Use North RU2 designation and zone. And this zone is a new zone applicable to the northern and central areas of East Hants. New land use policies are intended to protect the existing rural landscape while minimizing potential conflicts between different types of land uses. Commercial land uses permitted in the Rural Use North zone will be very similar to those already permitted in the Rural Use zone. So there's rural commercial uses, agricultural uses, forestry uses, etc. Not all commercial lands will be permitted as of right, or not all commercial uses will be permitted as of right. Some uses that may have a greater impact on the surrounding community are proposed to be considered by development agreement. These uses include, but are not limited to, explosive storage, chemical treatment of lumber, vehicle racetracks and amusement parks, any industrial development engaged in the production, wholesale storage, or distribution of dangerous goods, and salvage yards. Home-based businesses shall also be permitted as part of a residential development. In the zone, a wide variety of residential development will also be permitted in the new rural use north zone, including single-unit dwellings, two-unit dwellings, mini homes, accessory dwelling units, tiny homes on wheels, multiple unit buildings up to a maximum of 12 dwelling units, and cluster townhouse developments up to a maximum of 12 dwelling units. For residents wishing to construct multiple unit developments or cluster townhouse developments over 12 dwelling units, council will consider by development agreement planning applications between 12 and a maximum of 24 dwelling units. Council has also authorized staff to create regulations to permit recreational vehicles in the rural use north zone as a seasonal and permanent use in accordance with the following provisions. So for lots up to a maximum of 6,070 meters squared, one RV shall be permitted per lot. And for lots greater than 6,070 meters squared, a maximum of 3 RVs shall be permitted per lot. And property owners wishing to locate more than 3 RVs on a lot shall be required to apply for a permit for a campground. So the Fundy Flood Risk Overlay FF designation and zone. This new land use designation and zone was created to protect property owners along the Bay of Fundy from potential flooding. New main buildings, which are permitted by the underlying zone, but are located within the Fundy Flood Risk Overlay FF zone, shall be flood-proofed by requiring a minimum finished floor elevation of 10 meters, CVGD 2013. And that's just a standard vertical measurement the surveyors use in Canada. So most of the properties that we looked at for people, is the farthest they would have to build up the property was 1 to 2 meters. Some uses are restricted, which pose a risk to residents or the environment during a storm surge. For example, healthcare facilities, seniors housing, or something that stores chemicals. In some cases, zoning extends to a portion of the property that has already been lost to shoreline erosion. So, for example, if you have a cliff and you received letter from us saying that you had some flood risk on it. The reason that flood risk is there is because that portion of your property has already eroded, and it's just that your property lines still extend into the Bay of Fundy, even though that property has been lost, so it just shows up as Fundy flood risk. And just to note, the PAC is not recommending approval of these policies and regulations. Fundy Erosion FE 2050 and Fundy Erosion 2100 designation and zone. To understand the impacts of the Bay of Fundy tides on the coastal area of East Hants, Council commissioned a study to identify areas at risk of coastal erosion. Historical aerial photography and other data was used, and that's LiDAR data, used to identify the location of the coastline from 1973 to 2019. These rates of erosions were projected forward to identify the areas of risk of coastal erosion between now and the year 2100. As a result, 2 new zones have been created, the Fundy Erosion Overlay FE 2050 zone and the Fundy Erosion Overlay FE 2100 zone. In the Fundy Erosion Overlay 2050 zone, new structures are not permitted as the land is expected to erode within the next 27 years. In the Fundy Erosion Overlay FE 2100 zone, new structures are only permitted by site plan approval and must be located on either skids or helical piles to allow for the structure to be relocated easily. Land in the FE 2100 zone is expected to erode in the next 77 years. Some exceptions apply to these regulations. For example, accessory structures to an existing main building are permitted in either zone, and replacement of the existing building due to fire or other damage is permitted. Where a coastal erosion study has been completed and a coastal bank has been stabilized, a new structure may be permitted in either zone, subject to the requirements of the land use bylaw. In some cases, the zoning may show, again, areas that have already eroded. And once again, Planning Advisory Committee is not recommending approval of these policies and regulations. So staff recommend actually that these zones remain in place. In less than a year, Nova Scotia has experienced disasters that have cost Nova Scotians billions of dollars in damage to personal property, to the government infrastructure, and to lost lives. So Hurricane Fiona in September cost, the insured damages from Hurricane Fiona are estimated over $800 million according to the Insurance Bureau of Canada, and Hurricane Fiona is currently the most costly extreme weather event recorded in Atlantic Canada. In February, we saw the polar vortex, and then a dry spring, which resulted in wildfires in this late spring, early summer. And then just last week, we had an extreme rainfall event. It's too early to determine and estimate the cost of last Friday's rainfall event, but needless to say, this event will also cost millions in insured damages and possibly billions in infrastructure repairs. East Hants has completed the Fundy vulnerability study and is now in a position to prevent damage to new construction due to rising sea levels, increased storm events, and more intense storms. Long-term residents understand the Fundy coastline, but new residents moving to our community do not have that historical knowledge. Another new zone is the Milford Groundwater Overlay, MGW designation and zone. And again, this was another zone where we had a study completed, and we held a meeting in the community to discuss that study. The purpose of the zone is to protect the impact of well interference on existing groundwater supplies. Council is proposing the Milford Groundwater MGW zone. So it's just an overlay zone. So again, the underlying zones are still in play. It's just that there's an extra set of regulations. New developments that include subdivisions where there are more than 4 residential lots to be created, over 4 residential units on a property, or water-intensive commercial uses require a development agreement application. A hydrogeological study will be required with these development agreement applications, and also for requests to rezone property within that Milford groundwater supply water overlay zone. So in the comprehensive plan portion of the municipality, we had some changes as well, and one of those changes was to the amenity space requirements for the multi-unit residential R3 zone, to the mixed-use center zone, and to the townhouse R2T zones. So common amenity space design requirements have been improved to try to create engaging park spaces for residents and to make them more barrier-free. Townhouses will require larger private amenity spaces, while on-street townhouses will no longer require common outdoor amenity space. Changes have also been proposed to the village core designation and zone. Amendments are proposed that allow for an increase for an as-of-right single-use commercial building up to 400 meters squared before a development agreement is required. We've also included an incentive to try to protect homes of a historic nature within our village cores. And we've included tweaks to the village core form-based zone regulations. Another new provision is for campgrounds. So previously, campgrounds were permitted as of right with no real regulations other than minimum lot size. So new regulations are being proposed, and these will be applicable to both the rural use north and to the rural use zones. Campgrounds would have to go through a site plan approval process, and there would be a minimum lot size of a campground, and it would be 2 hectares, and the minimum lot frontage would be 30 meters, where a neighboring land use is residential and within 250 meters of the campground. The campground shall be buffered with fencing, opaque vegetative strips, or existing substantive vegetation, or berms to minimize the transmission of noise. Fires are only permitted in fire pits, barbecues, wood-burning stoves, and appliances. All elements, including parking, campsites, public gathering areas, loading areas, and outdoor storage shall be set back 12 meters from the side and rear lot boundaries. Garbage and waste shall be enclosed and concealed, and the campground shall not create undue traffic or pedestrian hazards. Traffic and pedestrian circulation shall be clearly marked, and a single-unit dwelling shall be permitted as an accessory use for the residence of either the owner or the operator of the campground. Village core parking and Shubenacadie. So many of the buildings in Shubenacadie Village core are older mercantile buildings constructed in the early 20th century and form an important part of the character of that community. East Hants Council sees an opportunity to protect the buildings on smaller lots by taking a different approach to parking than in other village cores. Council has authorized staff to include an item, or we've already included an item in our budget for the design and layout of parking on municipally owned lands. Council is also considering through this plan update amendments to the land use bylaw to change the way that parking is considered in the village core, so you wouldn't need as many parking spaces and you could use that shared or common parking space. So there are many other plan update items, and those documents have been available to the public on our municipal website, and they have been presented to both our Planning Advisory Committee and Council to review. And some of the other items in it are changes to our citizen engagement policy, policy changes, removal of references to the wind energy designation zone because it no longer exists, amendments to the definition section, and we've added new definitions. Amendments to our subdivision bylaw, housekeeping and mapping updates to the comprehensive plan portion of the municipality, amendments to the walkable comprehensive development district mapping, and many other smaller policy and regulation tweaks based on current best practices. In conclusion, the plan update process is now complete. Land use planning policy and regulations are proposed that extends to all properties within East Kansas municipal boundaries. Extensive citizen engagement has taken place throughout the plan update process, and planning staff now recommend second reading and approval of the East Kansas official community plan so that the planning documents may be forwarded to the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing for review. Thank you, Madam Warden.
Thank you, Debbie. Just before I open the floor to councilors, I just want to clarify, in case any of the public are confused by the very in-depth and spirited description of the Fundy erosion and Fundy flood overlay zones, PAC has been very clear in their direction to council that they wish these zones to be removed, and the motions coming forward will be reflecting that. I would now ask if any member of council has questions for staff. Councillor Musa.
Thank you, Madam Warden. So in the RU2 zone, you're allowed up to 12 units without development agreement and maximum of 24 with development agreement.
Through you, Madam Warden, yes, that's correct.
So if somebody came with an application over 24 is refused, or council still have the can still approve it?
Through you, Madam Warden, you would have to amend your policy, because your policy right now indicates that only a maximum of 24 units would be considered by development agreement. So you'd have to amend that policy to allow for more to be considered.
So,
Or a rezoning.
Through, I believe we would have to again amend the policy in order to allow for R3 uses where there's no essential services.
so if someone,
We can't hear back here. Can you folks speak up just a little bit more, please?
Sorry about that.
Everyone, please, I'm guilty as well, speak closer to your microphones, please.
so if someone have like, let's say 50 acres and he cannot subdivide it because he cannot build a new road, so he's only limited to 24 unit, even though if you could subdivide it, he could make 100 units. And if he could get approval for septic and water well, so why are we limiting 24 when we needed some housing everywhere in the province now?
Do you want me?
Through you, Madam Warden. Remember, this zone is for rural areas, so it is, actually, it's really unusual to even allow up to 24 units in a rural area. And I would say if you got 50 acres, you're going for a larger development, as you're describing, there is another tool, and that is we have something called the Rural Comprehensive Development District. So council could put that in place on a piece of land and then negotiate a development agreement for a larger scale development with townhouses or
I just want to
multi-units.
make sure there's another option for someone, because I know it's a rural area, and Pockwalk is a rural area, and there's some 96 units going over there. So why we let people go there and not encourage them to come to our area? Thank you.
Councillor Rhino.
Thank you, Madam Warden. We have dealt with regard to campgrounds, we have dealt with the issues of buffering and setbacks and so on and so forth with regard to neighboring properties. But that's only on a go-forward basis. So I guess it's not a question, it's just a statement. I'm extremely disappointed that we can't do anything for the problems that exist now will still exist after this passes and moves on. So those people will still have that same problem, but any on a go-forward basis won't. And it just seems to me that it's just unfair, because I've known a couple of people who have had problems and with businesses, and it just doesn't have to be a campground. And if there's no recourse for them, they'll just have to put up with it while anything going in the future will be dealt with. So I guess I'm a little disappointed that way.
Thank you, Madam Warden. That's just a point of planning law, that if you have a legal activity prior to a regulation coming into effect, it can stay there forever. So that, we can't, it's always a go-forward basis with planning. And you may also remember that council did consider a licensing bylaw for campgrounds last year, I guess it was, and decided that would have dealt with some, not all of these issues. And in the end, council decided not to put a licensing bylaw in place. So, we will do it as a go-forward basis.
It wouldn't have dealt with the issues that I'm experiencing out there that people are coming to me with. No buffering, right up against their line. It's like, so too bad, so sad. Can't do anything for you. But if you put another campground in there down the road, they have to have that buffering. They have to have that. And it just seems to me it's unfair.
But unfortunately, it's the law. We do not have the legal ability to apply these regulations to campgrounds that already exist. We cannot legally do it. We've thoroughly investigated the issue. Councillor Tingley.
Through the chair, I just would like to talk about the Fun Day zoning that we taken out of this. I just want to say that I'm disappointed that we did it. We had experts in here explaining why we should do it. Staff did an excellent report explaining why we should do it. There's examples all around the country of why we should do it. We just saw in the last year what happened in Port aux Basques and northern Nova Scotia, northern PEI, New Brunswick. These rules do not get designed to penalize people. They get designed to protect people. The staff mentioned the cost of the DFA claims. They're skyrocketing, and at the end of the day, all the taxpayers contribute towards the cost of those repairs, because when people slide into the ocean or property damage occurs, they come back to the federal government, ask them to pay for the damages, and all the taxpayers pay for it. To have no zoning just seems to be a mistake. Like the reason we have laws and zoning is just another law is to protect citizens. It's not to cause any harm to citizens. Although I do realize if there could be some financial implications and that sort of thing. But there are compelling reasons to have this type of zoning. I'd be prepared to make a motion to put it back in there if I'm allowed to.
Not at this time.
Okay.
That would be contrary to the motion that's coming forward, which has not been made yet.
Right.
It would
Okay.
change the intent of the motion.
Okay. I don't think it would pass, but those are my feelings about this. I think we had an opportunity to do something. The province is dragging their heels on this Coastal Erosion Protection Act. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't be taking some kind of action on it. We've all heard the information. If it's going to go forward like this, I just want to state those comments. That's it.
Does any other counselor have any comments or questions for staff? Seeing none, I will now open the floor for comments and questions. If you are viewing the YouTube live stream, you may use the YouTube chat feature, which is being monitored. First, does anyone attending in person have any questions or comments? I'd ask if you come forward to the mic and state your name and address, please.
My name's Ronald Hughes. I lived in Milford since the mid-60s. I'm in my present home now for the last 52 years, and that's right next door to where they're planning their building. So my main concern is my well, as I brought up at the last meeting. Yeah, I can't drop the pipe no further. And I wouldn't even want to dream what it costs to put a new well in today. Now, that's for my concerns. I took a drive down the road the day after we had the big rain, and I took a drive back. And I had a look at the said property where you're planning on doing the building. If any of you know where the corral fence is, say where they had the horses, the lower piece of the railing towards the road, the lower end of the fence, the water was approximately 20 feet beyond that. Now, I don't know where these buildings are supposed to start, but I know there is supposed to be 3 going up the right-hand side of the road and 2 across the top. So that's just something you can put in your notebook. My one neighbor has his lawn totally flooded. It never ever, of course, we never had a rain like this before, but it's never ever flooded in my terms of living there. My neighbor across the road, I watched him today taking all the stuff out of his basement, trying to dry it out, 4 feet of water. The sewer pickup, probably 15, 20 feet from the corner of his house. The water flowing up against the side of the house, literally on his house. Now, the problem I see there is it's a crappy sewer installation. It's not big enough. Take a look around. Up Lacey Hill, up Recreation, all across the back behind our place. It covers a really large area. And there's one culvert, to my knowledge, that crosses right at the end of my driveway. And believe me, it won't cover a quarter of that in a big rain.
I have to stop you. This hearing tonight is about updates to the community plan.
I can't
It's
hear you.
not- This hearing tonight concerns updates to the community plan. It's
Yep.
not about specific individual developments.
Yeah, I'm just letting you know, though, about where I seen the water on the other side of the corral fence.
Okay.
Thank you.
Debbie, do you have a comment?
Sure. I can just mention that there is an application currently going on in Milford, and that application isn't being addressed tonight. That'll be addressed at a future public hearing. But in relation to that, with the plan update, we are proposing to bring in regulations that would require anybody developing over 4 units to do a hydrogeological study. And in the case of the application that the gentleman's talking about, that person did have to do a hydrogeological study as well. And that'll be presented at a later date.
Thank you. All right, does anyone else from the public wish to speak? Come head to the mic and name and address, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Willie Versteeg, and I am from 1765 Highway 2, and I'm making representation on land owned by my wife and myself's company at 2352 Highway 2, right across from high school. I am generally supportive of the overlay zone. I believe good information on water quality and quantity is essential for high-quality development. Personally, I feel my wife and I are in the business of providing solutions, not conflicts with neighbors or problems for ourselves or our customers. Even in a non-regulated environment, water needs to be addressed and quantified before I would say concrete gets poured. Why would you want to develop if there isn't good water and plenty of it? I believe these regulations that are proposed would remove NIMBYism with respect to water And we definitely see that as being a positive. Of course, when there's positive, I also believe there's a few negatives, and some of those I'll highlight. And I was always told, don't come with negatives unless you get a solution, so that'll follow that. There's no clear, from the information I was provided, definition of hydrogeological study. It's a big word, and I'm fat and old. So. I really want to understand what are the elements of the study. Is it for every development? Does one well constitute an adequate study, or do I need 2 or 3 or 4 wells to make an adequate study? How long are the studies good for? If my neighbor to my left and to my right do a study and it's positive, do I need one? Can a well drilling company do a study, or does it need to be an engineering firm? If I am paying for the study, is it tainted? Because it's information I'm paying for, and generally the guy who's paying gets to tell what part of what happens. What about other data? If I can prove that our development, for instance, is going to use less water than the minimum 4-unit development, do I still need a study? I believe, ladies and gentlemen, there is a simple solution. And in your planning documents, there's a quote that I would like to quote one of the lines. And a good plan balances the interests of individual property owners and the needs of the objectives of the wider community. I believe that to be true. I'm asking the question, why does the municipality not have its own independent well network to conduct those tests? I made this suggestion at the information meeting at the Milford Rec Hall, and I believe it was received positively, and I was disappointed to learn that it wasn't in there. The municipality already owns one well on property across from the high school. I believe it's not too onerous to either construct more wells or do shared cooperator agreements with private well owners to glean the data. And they could be done annually, and it could provide a good baseline of really good data to the whole community that the community can have a lot of confidence in because their own government provided it to them, not some developer from down the road. So I also believe if you did that, then the costs would be borne equitably by individuals and the wider community. Right now, you're placing all the onus on developers to provide the studies, which the cynic in me tells me that some folks will never be happy with data that comes from private individuals. So I'm suggesting, councillors, that you move this evening an amendment enabling the municipality of East Hants to do ongoing hydrogeological studies in the MGW zone. That would replace the requirements listed in the zone regulations, item number 2. And as I said, I did make this suggestion at the public information meeting, and I thought it was received as being a good idea, but it's not reflected. So to summarize, I think it's a good idea. I think putting the onus on one party only to provide the data, which may well be called into question, is a bit unfair. And I think this is something the municipality, with a very, very modest investment, could provide very good data. When the data comes from developers, it may come from 1 or 2 this year, maybe none for another 5 years. I think the community would really benefit if we had that information on an ongoing basis. And for that reason, I am making the suggestion that council suggest an amendment so that the municipality does the testing in lieu of the private developers doing it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Debbie, did you wish to?
Thank you, Madam Warden. So the study, the Milford groundwater study, is available online to anybody who wants to review it. And basically what the study said is that there was plenty of water in Milford. It's just that many people in Milford have shallower wells. And so when we require a hydrogeological study for development of over 4 units, that study has to look at well interference So making sure that the proposed development isn't going to interfere with the neighboring wells, or if it is going to interfere, at what level or whereabouts is going to interfere. There are no exact parameters around the hydrogeologic study other than it has to be done by a professional, and there are limited professionals who are hydrogeologists throughout the province. So basically, it's to determine what kind of impact you're going to have on your neighbor's groundwater supply. You want to do more?
Thank you, Madam Warren. Just to add to what Debbie said, in terms of making a change at this late stage, council is pretty constrained. You know, at this stage, you've given first reading to a set of documents, and you can take some policies out, but you can't change them or add them. So you know, that's something I guess that could be considered at a future update, but it's not something you could add tonight, I don't think.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, could I ask a question regarding that response? Thank you for that, John. But why are we here this evening if not to provide input into this plan?
Through you, Madam Warden. I mean, the public hearing is the last step in a process which, you know, had a fair bit of engagement throughout the 2+ years. And as I said, council, you know, this is the final check, I guess, for council, whether you're going to approve documents or not. And as I said, you would have to go back to first reading if you wanted to change something at this stage.
Does anyone else from the public wish to speak?
Hi, Ann Crow from Burnt Coat. I have some real concerns about a lot of this. My main concern, or one of the concerns I have is tonight, I'm not sure we should have supposedly an information meeting and have it the same night as a vote. You might hear something here tonight.
This is not an information meeting. It's
Well,
a
it was
public
supposed to be,
hearing.
right?
No, it's public
This is
hearing.
not the, well, public hearing, whatever.
It's an
Same.
entirely different beast.
Well, I still don't think a vote should be held after a public meeting to get info. That being said, I'm a little concerned about your erosion and Fundy floodplain. It's somewhat flawed from my point of view. I have banks all around me. I have places I have not moved a fence post in 45 years. I have other fields I have to check every year. I don't know why there should be a Fundy floodplain on my banks when they're 100 feet high. Because if that's the case, Noel's already gone. So I have a problem with that. I have a problem that every piece of property I have has been painted with the same brush. Now, I know Mr. Woodford doesn't like that comment, but it is. Yes, you follow the contour of the land, but it's the same width. And that's another problem I have. There was no scale with any of those plans. I don't know if you're going to be by my bathroom window or if it's a 10-foot scale. And there's no scale for the heights of the banks. And that tells what your erosion will do. So where I have a high bank, the erosion is very, very, very small. Where I have a lower bank, it's greater. If the province is going to let this go, I think we should too. There needs to be a lot more work on this. We cannot plan for 100-year problems or a 1,000-year problem like we had last weekend. And I might add, all of the Fundy Coast fared very, very well, and we got a lot of water. But we did okay. So maybe you need to look at other, if you're going to paint us with a brush, then you better paint everybody else. But as far as I'm concerned, please, just wait till we have more to go with, because right now, from what I see, it's just not done right. And
Well, the recommendation tonight is to remove those two overlay
Perfect.
zones. So they,
perfect.
and assuming that that recommendation passes, they will not be
Well, I think at this
in the
point it
plan.
needs to, because it isn't right.
Anyone else?
Don Dixon, 12083 Highway 215, commenting on campgrounds and the development of new campgrounds and existing campgrounds. I agree with Mr. Rhino that these new recommendations don't go far enough. I've been living there for 40 years, and some of my neighbors have been there for 40 years. And when there's no public consultation, no public development plan, and council approves a permit to allow someone to put whatever they want in for a campground, I don't think that's right. And I think that this recommendation should be taken back to a first reading and further study done on it to the disruption of the residents that are currently living there and paying taxes. To my knowledge, you could put in 100 campers and nobody's going to pay taxes. So then we, as the residents in that area, pay the taxes for our roads, and nobody comes along after these campers leave every weekend and picks all the garbage up. You can drive down 215 and every weekend and see what's happening. There should be limitations, in my view, on how many campers are in there. The setback of 30 meters, is it? 12 meters from the side or the rear of a boundary. So what's that do for you? I know there's one in Selma. I wouldn't want to live beside that one. You probably got 40, 50 trailers in there now, if not more. What's the permit that the council is giving to cover the environmental of the development? I was told before at the first meetings that that's not council's job because you don't do nothing with environment. Well, I think council should be looking at the environment. You know, you got in your report the plan here about setbacks from waterways, but there's more to waterways for the residents living there. It's the potable water and the access to that potable water. So those are my comments, and I think it should be taken back to a first draft and look at all the concerns of the residents living around these mini campgrounds or these campgrounds that are coming in and disrupting the life of the people that's been there for 40 years. Thank you.
Through you, Madam Warden, I understand the residents' concerns. Unfortunately, planning documents, as John had mentioned, are not retroactive, so we can't go back and regulate somebody that's already in place. Under the proposed regulations, we're proposing a 250 meters, if there's a residential use, so that campground would have to be set back 250 meters and then be buffered after that if the residential uses within that distance. And the other message just about whether they pay taxes or not, I actually looked into that, and it depends on the campground. Some campgrounds do pay commercial taxes and others don't. I don't know what triggers it or what doesn't. Maybe it's just the fact that some of them have variety, like a convenience store on their property, or like a hall or somewhere that's a bar, so they get taxed for commercial for those purposes. But in general, RVs don't get taxed for commercial get property taxed. And I was going to mention one other thing, but I've lost it.
I believe they do get taxed, just not commercial tax.
Yeah, not commercial tax, yeah.
Perhaps the environmental side?
Oh, yes, on the environmental side, thank you, Madam Warden. So on the environmental side, if a campground is supplying the people camping there with potable water, then they have to have permission to provide a water source from Nova Scotia Environment, and that source is supposed to be checked just like anybody else who provides potable water to like a mini home park or something like that. So they do have to follow those regulations. And I did talk to them also in regard to septic disposal, and they are supposed, if they don't have a pumper truck that comes in and pumps out the RVs, they are supposed to have some sort of central service sewer, or central system. But I don't believe that Nova Scotia Environment goes out and checks those systems. So if there is an issue with them, it's really complaint based. So if the resident is having issues with smell or anything like that, I would advise them to contact Nova Scotia Environment. And fortunately, it is a subject that the municipality doesn't look at, is environmental controls.
It's not within our,
Yeah,
it's a provincial.
it's a provincial jurisdiction. And the other last thing I would mention, just if we did go back to first reading on these campground regulations, right now, because we've had first reading already, any campground, a new campground would have to follow these regulations. If we went back to first reading, then somebody could open up again another campground this summer because the first reading wouldn't be in place, right, John? Yeah.
So there would be no regulation until
Exactly.
such time as another first reading.
And one last comment is that in the future, we may find that we do need tweaks to the campground policies and regulations, and because it's the first time we've actually had them in place. And as we go through our documents, are living documents, and as we go through these experiences with new applications, we can bring forward any issues or that we see that may need to be addressed by council.
Thank you. Does any other member of the public have any comments or questions for staff? The gentleman coming forward.
Good evening. My name is Roger Bronson. I live in Milford. I just have one question, and perhaps I didn't hear correctly. When we talked about the hydrogeological study for Milford, and it was stated that these people are professionals, to me that's kind of vague. Who are they? Who do they work for? Are they provincial or federal? How are we sure that they are kept at arm's length from any developer? It just says, to say that they're professionals are fine, but I'm concerned that their decisions can affect a lot of people, and I want to make sure that they are truly independent. Thank you.
John?
Through you, Madam Warden. I mean, this is an interesting issue, and it comes up from time to time with things like traffic studies engaged by applicants or any sort of other engineering study. What I would say about, there are actually very few hydrologists in Nova Scotia. The reports we've seen, although they have to be paid for by the applicant, I haven't seen one yet that I would think wasn't an independent report from a hydrologist. They're very professional and very few, so I don't think that will be one of our issues.
I just note that we do have public in the other room, and if anyone there has any comments or questions, please come forward into chambers and approach the mic to have your questions addressed. Seeing no other member of the public coming forward at this time, I would ask, does any member of the public have any questions or comments through the live chat on the YouTube live stream? There are? Okay.
Through you, Madam Warden. Colleen Smith of 2204 Highway 2 Milford states groundwater quality and not just quantity needs to be addressed in a hydrogeological study. When many wells are drawing on one aquifer, quality can suffer.
Thank you. Ms. Debbie?
Through you, Madam Chair, I was just going to say that I imagine that would be part of the studies, that the hydrogeologist would look at the quality and quantity of water. From the study that we've had, we've been told that the quality of Milford aquifer is actually in good shape compared to other places. So,
Are there any other comments or questions on the live stream? There will be opportunity, but not at this time, Counselor. So I'm seeing no further questions. I would now ask the Chair of the Planning Advisory Committee to present his committee's recommendation. Oh, sorry, does any staff have any final comments? No. Okay. So, over to you, Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you, Madam Warden. Planning Advisory Committee recommends to council that council direct staff to remove the Fundy Erosion Overlay FE 2050 and FE 2100 designations and zones and the Fundy Flood Risk Overlay FF designation and zone from the community plan update until such time when the province looks into the province-wide plan for Fundy coastline erosion. And Planning Advisory Committee recommends to council that council give second reading and approve the amended document, give second reading and approve the 2023 Municipal Planning Strategy, Bylaw P 400, give second reading and approve the 2023 Land Use Bylaw, Bylaw P 500, and give second reading and approve the 2023 Subdivision Bylaw, Bylaw P 600. As Chair of PAC, I so move.
Seconded by Councillor Green. I'm just going to pause and check with the CAO. Are these okay as one motion, or should they be split? So we do have two separate things here. I'm told by the CAO they should probably have been moved as separate motions. So I would probably be looking for a motion to split the motion.
So moved.
Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Rhino. So on the first part of the motion, which is the Planning Advisory Committee recommends to council that council direct staff to remove the Fundy Erosion Overlay FE 2050 and FE 2100 designations and zones and the Fundy Flood Risk Overlay FF designation and zone from the community plan update until such time when the province looks into a province-wide plan for Fundy coastline erosion. That is the motion that is currently on the floor. Do any councilors have any questions on the motion?
Question.
Sandra, did you?
Not on that.
Seeing none, the question has been called. We will go to the vote. And the motion has passed by a vote of 10 to 1, with Councillor Tingley voting nay. Now we will go to the second part of the motion, which is Planning Advisory Committee. I don't believe we need this moved and seconded again. The whole thing was moved and seconded, and we simply split the motion. So, some expert in parliamentary procedure can confirm that. Okay, thank you. Planning Advisory Committee recommends to council that council give second reading and approve the amended document, give second reading and approve the 2023 Municipal Planning Strategy, Bylaw P-400, give second reading and approve the 2023 Land Use Bylaw, Bylaw P-500, and give second reading and approve the 2023 Subdivision Bylaw, Bylaw P-600. Just for clarification, this is the item we're discussing and voting on now. Councillor Garden Cole.
Thank you, Madam Warden. So just to go to the hydrogeologists who do the studies, we've determined that they're professionals and that, you know, non-bias. But when talking about the quality of the water, you had said that you're assuming that they test that as well. Is there any reason why we can't ensure that they test that when they're doing the geological study?
Through Madam Chair, the parameters that were included in the regulations were mainly for the well interference to determine if they were going to interfere with the neighbor's wells, water. It doesn't directly say to determine what the quality is. Now, as part of that, they may look at ensuring that the digging of the well won't interfere with the quality of the neighbor's well is in addition to that, but it's not listed as a parameter within the document itself.
Yeah, through you, Madam Warden. Quite often what those reports will do is they'll outline what needs to be treated with whatever is, water tends to be very hard in that area, so there's usually treatment recommendations that come with it. That's not really regulatory per se, it's more a recommendation for the property owner after the fact. But as Debbie said, it's really, what we're really trying to do is make sure there's not well interference for neighbors.
Thank you. Councillor Rhino.
Thank you. I am going to support this motion, but with some reluctancy. I'm going to support it because it's far better document for the rural area than when we started with this process. Far better. Not perfect, but not as intrusive to our residents in the rural area. I still have concerns with one I mentioned tonight about businesses that have problems that are looked after in the future, but not in the present. My problem around guinea hens, which I brought up around this council for a long time, crossing on neighbors' property and causing havoc to the neighbors. So if those guinea hens are there before this went into first reading, we can't touch them if they go around on the neighbor's property, but we can if somebody goes out tomorrow and buys 2 guinea hens and they're running over. There's a lot, it just doesn't seem fair in the gist of things, And how are we going to prove if there is a complaint that they did when they bought these guinea hens? How are we going to actually prove that? Those are just a couple of examples that really I'm concerned about.
Do you want me to do it?
That does come up from time to time with enforcement cases of when a land use started, and it's a little bit more difficult when it's something like an animal. But I have seen cases where we chase things down. For example, I remember a horse case where somebody had bills from farriers and so on that had, from years before that established when the land use started. So, we would do this a similar kind of thing, and you would, if there's a complaint coming in from a neighbor, they would present evidence and so on. So you would look at all that.
I do also, John, there has been a question, and it's not been brought directly to, but I think in the interest of providing clarity for the public, I think there's some confusion around why we don't have to go back to first reading when we remove something from the plan, and if we changed or added something different that we would. So if you could perhaps explain that for folks.
Sure. So you've given first reading to a number of things. It's a huge package of amendments. If you were dealing with any one of those amendments, council could choose not to give second reading and not approve that. So that's essentially what you're doing. So the section of the bylaws that deal with the Fundy overlay, for example, you gave first reading to, you're choosing not to give that section of the document second reading. You can do that. You can't add because you haven't given first reading to whatever you would want to add. So I don't know if that explains it any better, but.
Thank you. Councillor Garden-Cole.
Thank you, Madam Warden. And I just had one other thing to add, and it's about the campgrounds. So I just want to be clear that, these people the campgrounds that already exist, and people who are struggling with the problems with that, because they are already there, we have no control over making any changes to that going forward. So I guess their only recourse is if there's disturbances to our bylaws, to report that and that kind of thing. But there's no, even if we went back to first reading on things, there's no changes that we could make that would help out those folks who are experiencing issues with already existing campgrounds.
That's correct. It's a pre-existing use that was legal at the time it was established, and we do not have the ability to, it's a non-conforming use. The only thing that could happen was if that non-conforming use were to stop for a consecutive 2-year period, then it would cease to be a non-conforming use and would have to adhere to the new regulations to start up again. But
Okay.
that's the only option that we have.
Okay, and it is unfortunate. Thank you.
Okay, does any other counselor have any final comments or questions? Seeing none, the question has been called. We will go to the vote. And the motion has passed unanimously. Thank you very much, folks. It's been a long and drawn-out saga since we started this. Some parts were easier than others. Councilor Rhino?
So the process, could you, through you to staff, could you, the process now that second reading has taken place, could you tell us about the process? How, can you tell us how long the provincial government has to approve it, or is there, they have all kinds of time? And what happens from there?
Through you, Madam Warden. So we will, prepare the documents and get the signature from the CAO and the corporate seal. All that will be sent off to the Provincial Director of Planning. Their staff will review the documents, and basically what they do is they look to see if our documents meet the provincial statements of interest for planning, the 5 provincial statements. And if they determine that, that it should be reviewed further, that it may not comply with the provincial statements of interest, then it goes to the minister, and they would, within 30 days, let us know that. And then they would have an additional 60 days for ministerial review. So in total, it's 90 days review before we would find out if they're approved by the minister or if they're going to send them back to us. Or the minister could also make amendments on his own and send us amended documents to implement. And then once we receive the documents back, we put a newspaper ad in the paper, and then they're in effect.
Thank you for that explanation.
What will be in the hands of the province going forward. Well, that concludes tonight's public hearing, and I'd like to thank everyone for attending. We do have a small amount of business that we didn't finish last evening to deal with following this public hearing. So if council's willing, I'm going to say we'll take a 5-minute break, and then we'll reconvene to finish the business from last night. So we'll be back at, let's make it 8:13. Okay, folks, I'd ask you to take your seats as we call the meeting back to order. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We do have a quorum in our seats, so we will return to our meeting. Let's go back to the agenda from last night. Yes, the next thing on the agenda from yesterday evening was the warden's report. So I will turn the chair over to the deputy warden and give my report for the month.
Thank you, Madam Warden. Go right ahead.
Okay, well, July was a fairly busy month. On the 1st of July, I attended the Hay Days in Shubenacadie and participated in the parade. Councillor McPhee was kind enough to chauffeur me around in a very lovely convertible, and it was certainly an enjoyable event. I was also able to take in the car show and some other things there, and it was first of July, not including COVID, in many, many years that I wasn't working at a community function in my own community. On the 3rd of July, I presented Mr. Eddie McPhee with a certificate recognizing his 90th birthday, and he was able to go and rummage a little bit and come back and show me the certificate I had given him for his 80th birthday as well. On July the 12th, we had a meeting, myself and Councillor Rhino and the CAO and some staff with the RCMP, who were doing us the courtesy of introducing us to their preferred candidate to become the new staff sergeant and allow him to eyeball us, for lack of a better word, and us to eyeball him. And it was certainly a very good meeting, I thought, and appreciated that opportunity. On July 13th, of course, we had the CCRCE here, particularly to discuss the busing issue. I'm not sure any resolution came from that, but I am sure that we were at least able to impress upon them that it was a very serious concern that we had. On July 15th, I presented my oldest resident in my district, Mrs. Marg Harris, with a certificate celebrating her 107th birthday. I can only hope to be as spry and with it when I'm 87, if I live that long, as this lady is at 107. She keeps very much up on current events and the news, and very happy to share her opinion with you too, and just a remarkable woman. On July 20th, I sat in on the Utility and Review Board's virtual boundary hearing. At that hearing, there were several undertakings or questions asked, and John is providing the information that they asked for. Of course, on the 21st of July, we suffered a catastrophic storm, as everyone is aware, and we've all been dealing in some way or other with the aftermath of that since then. And I'd just like to take another opportunity to extend our sympathy to the families of the victims of that storm. Our hearts, my heart, and I'm sure our collective hearts go out to these folks. And on July the 24th, I was fortunate enough to be invited by Emergency Measures to accompany them along with the CAO and our EMO officer on a helicopter tour of the area to have a look at some of the worst affected areas that were hit by the storm. Now, I won't lie to you folks, I didn't know if I was brave enough to get on that helicopter or not, right up until the last minute. But get on it I did, and once I was on it and we lifted off, it was fine. And it was certainly a different perspective from the air, and certainly even where the water had receded, you could still see where it had been, and it certainly gave a different viewpoint of everything in the areas we were able to see. And I would report also that on that helicopter tour, as we returned to Shubenacadie coming up the river, we found one of our accessible docks that had broken free and floated up the river. So now we know where it is. We just have to figure out how to recover it. So other than, that's pretty much it, unless I missed anything, and I'm sure if I did, someone will have it in their report. Other than the, directors' meetings and our regular meetings, that concluded my month, so thank you, folks.
Thank you, Warden. Does any member of staff, does any member of council have any questions for the Warden with regard to her report? Seeing no questions, Warden, back over to you. Oh, sorry. Councilor Mitchell.
Yes, just a quick question to the warden. Since you went up to the CN Tower, you're getting braver by the moment. I don't know how you do it, but I commend you for your bravery.
With my fear of heights, I'm not sure how I managed to overcome that myself, but.
I stay on the ground still.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Okay, back to you, Warden.
Thank you. So the remaining business is, of course, business from counselors. So we will start with Counselor, I don't remember where I started last month, so let's start with Counselor Tingley tonight. Oh, did I? Sorry, I already told Counselor Tingley he could start. Remind me next month.
Okay, Chair, I'll try to get through mine quick. I'm going to forego everything through the month because some residents asked me to present some information regarding the flooding. So it's regarding the people on Robert Scott Drive. Their situation is no more or less important than anybody else, but they've asked me to present this information for your consideration, so I'm going to present it. I've already provided photographs and information.
Could I just interrupt? We had added Robert Scott flooding to the agenda yesterday. Do you wish to do that now under business from counselors instead of a separate agenda item?
Absolutely, yep.
That's fine with me.
It's only going to take me a few minutes to get through this.
Thank you.
So I've already provided the photographs and information that the residents provided me. And I'll just add a few words. There's a small stream at the back of these houses on Robert Scott that flooded. Then there's CN tracks with a culvert some distance behind that stream. Between the small stream and the ditch and the culvert, there's trees and thick bushes. I'm told by residents that the municipality owns the property between the back of their house and the culvert. I don't know if that's correct. Maybe Jesse could say something about this at the end of this. There's garbage and debris in the stream behind the residents' homes. I'm told, but I did not inspect, that there's a significant number of fallen trees, garbage, and other debris on what they say is the municipal property between their properties and this CN culvert. The ditch between the homes that flooded, I'm told, is owned by the Department of Highways. There's a ditch that goes off of Robert Scott between these houses that flooded. And Councillor McPhee, they tell me, is pretty familiar with this ditch. Told that a significant amount of garbage regularly flows down this ditch and into the stream behind their house. It's mostly garbage that when they put their garbage out for collection, it gets blown by the wind and into the ditch and ends up in the streams and in the woods behind their house. One resident on Highway number 2 told me that he saw 4 creosote logs in his yard during the storm. This is just down the road from Robert Scott, but it would be affected by the same water. At one point, the water was running in the opposite direction. There was so much pressure coming back from the river, and these creosote logs were flowing in his yard. And then when the water went back to the normal path, the logs went away. And he assumes that these logs are coming from the train tracks. A number of residents observed that they saw the water drop from 3.5 meters to almost normal level within 2 hours, the day after the flood, when no other area, the levels were dropping like that. Another resident just in that area told me he had been out kayaking and heard gurgling around where this culvert was. And then about 5 or 6 o'clock at night, he was sitting on his deck. He could normally see the culvert from his back deck. And all of a sudden, he heard this big release of water. It sounded like a bang of release of water. And then he heard a speedboat or a powerboat take off. He never saw what happened, but they just put it together and think that something at this CN culvert let go. They believe the culvert was blocked and the water backed up, and some of them say it caused the flood, but most of them are just saying, look, it probably just exacerbated the flood. You know, nobody's denying there was 250 or 300 millimeters of rain that come down. Some of the residents report to me that the municipality had cleaned up garbage on what they say is the municipality property in 2008 and cleared the bushes around this stream that goes back there towards the CN culvert. So what they've asked me is if I would come back to the municipality and ask the municipality, would they consider doing a similar cleanup of the garbage that's in these streams and clearing around the stream or ditches like they did back in 2008. One of the residents asked if a stake could be placed at the lift station with a blue marker showing the high water mark that day. He mentioned that some other jurisdictions have that, and they in other countries and in other parts of Canada. But only one resident asked about that. Many of the residents requested that a backup generator be added to support the pumping station at the bottom of Robert Scott, because every time the power goes out, the sewer backs up, and the ones that are on the lower part end up getting the sewer backup, even though they've got check valves and that sort of thing. Finally, the last thing, is they want to know what advice or assistance the municipality can provide to residents to help identify a fix for ongoing flooding in this area. You know, they believe it's a number of people should be involved in the fix. CN, the municipality, the province, the feds, whoever type of thing. But, you know, they just wish somebody would spearhead it. And I know it's not that easy, and I'll just finish off here. So again, it's a difficult time for everybody that's had a flood, not just these residents. And I'm not just representing these residents. I handle every other resident the same way when they call me. It's just that these residents asked me to make this presentation. As far as I'm concerned, there's no liability on the municipality for this flood. The primary and proximate cause of the flood is historical rainfall. This is not about blame. I don't know what the municipality can or should do, and possibly others should be spearheading this. There's no point to get into blaming or anything like that. And like staff mentioned tonight, the federal government spends hundreds of millions, if not billions, on DFA claims every year. Maybe they ought to spend some of this money on repairing some of these problems so that you don't have these claims. I don't know if the municipality could lobby the federal government, or we can write a letter to somebody, but I think the residents would like to see us do something. So I don't know what we can do. That's the report.
My suggestion would be, if everyone is agreeable, that we leave it with staff, and staff will, they don't have the answers to these things tonight, obviously. If we leave it with staff, they can contact and work with you directly through some of these questions. Is that agreeable?
That sounds perfectly reasonable. This is,
And they may not have answers for everything, but they would work with you to provide what information they could.
well, I've advised these people that I can't promise anything. There's none of this stuff appears to be quick fixes to me. I don't know what the municipality can or cannot do, but I would just like to have a look at it and respond to them in due course with something. And even if we can't do anything, I'll go back with that. But they want me to present this, so I'm presenting it. I've got some personal thoughts about all this. I find it very frustrating that it happens. The same thing happens over and over, and I don't think it's abuse. I think the federal government should be spearheading some of this type of stuff, but this is bigger than I am as a little counselor type of thing. But that's about all. I don't want to take up any more time, but that's the
But
situation.
it works for you if staff,
Absolutely.
okay. Is that work for you, Jesse, as well? The CIO's indicated that she would be good with that.
Through Madam Warden, at a high level, I would like to take the time to respond quickly to a few items, make some quick recommendations on short-term actions, and then follow up with everything else on the detail. Because I think there's an opportunity to be responsive the week of this major event. And if council will indulge that, I would proceed.
Go ahead.
Unfortunately, I'll start off with there is no fix. So there is no fix to climate change right now. So the wording that we have to tailor is managing everyone's expectations, our own expectations of what can be done. We can mitigate and we can build resilience. Those are the themes, and I think we have to change the language just in general. That's just an overarching statement. There is no fix to what happened on Friday. It was big. So I do want to talk on recent things that the municipalities attempted. The backup power, the municipality had submitted applications in the last couple of years for solar backup, a study to see if we could find ways to create solar backup generations at all of our lift stations. We were looking to trial that. We weren't successful in that application. Just wanted to be public facing that those efforts have already started. We haven't been successful and got an uptake yet, but looking to continue that. We've been increasing our volume of backup generators. Each lift station has a plug-in option for a generator backup. However, we don't have permanent backup power and it's mobile. And the other challenge with that particular area was at one point certain things were underwater. And so the next lift station upstream of that was Barney's Brook, which was completely underwater and the power pulled. So even if you pushed from Robert Scott Drive, it was going nowhere in that particular situation, just for that instance. Doesn't mean it shouldn't be looked into. I just want to provide context that would be very challenging short term to just deal with Robert Scott Drive. The land. So there are two. So Robert Scott Drive is a provincial road. It has two drainage easement areas. They're really actually land parcels that the road right of way, it's part of the road right of way and it drains through, and that is provincial. The land behind it is an interesting parcel of land owned by the municipality. So there is a green space, and what that is, it's not of any functional use per se by the municipality. It's something that when the municipality began requesting for open space from developers as part of a contribution, the municipality would take a percentage and not look into what it was. So we received, as a municipality, non-usable flood-prone land as open space contribution for this one and several other developments. There's a few others examples of that in the corridor, and you can see a progression where the municipality learned from that experience and subdivisions improved over time on use of open space contributions and being strategic in that. But that is a legacy item from those kinds of events. That's what it is. Debris buildup, have to look into that. We don't offer garbage picking per se, but it's a municipal property. I don't know what happened in 2008, but I want to follow up on that after in more detail. And I referenced talking. I have two suggestions. So there's two major players along this flood area, and it's not just this Robert Scott area and Robert Scott Drive area, and it revolves around the choke points in this most flood-prone area, which is the Shuby River, the CN Rail, and Highway 2 between Enfield and Shubenacadie. That is the circle of challenging water drainage. And within that specifically, there are two opportunities that are outside of the municipal control, but there's a chance for us to influence entities that do have governmental control. One being the cross culverts across Highway 2 in that general area, and the other being the CN-owned culverts underneath the rail line. And so their staff are just getting into some information now that was part of the capacity review, and we're going through draft chapters or volumes of that. And we had the consultant do a pre-look at those two things, and there is an opportunity for a letter from the municipality to advocate to the province on responding to culvert condition assessment information the municipality has become aware of, with recommendations of replacements and debris removal in strategic areas along Highway 2 between Enfield and Milford, based on preliminary discussions of reports received. That is one opportunity. The next opportunity is for the municipality to send a letter to CN copying governing jurisdictions or bodies. Got to figure out who the hammer is. I don't have that off the top of my head. To advocate for a review of the sizing and condition of CN culverts with relations to 1 in 5 and 1 in 100 storms, their adequacy, and making sure they're clear of debris. I think those two things on those two entities, we could make those requests, tie it to this event as an example, and it starts something. It documents there's a need of a look at those items. It's responsive to the residents on what they've experienced. I don't know that any of those areas are the cause of anything, but it's a great opportunity to inspect them and respond if there's damage or debris or any blockages. And I think that would be productive. So those would be my two recommended letters if it was the will of council this evening. And that's at a high level. Everything else in detail, I'd have to look deeper into your comments. I do have some notes received already on comments from Robert Scott Drive. I think we have to go deeper into that at a later date, but absolutely willing to do that.
Thank you, Jesse.
I'm completely satisfied with that answer. Jesse, I would move that you send those letters, the two letters that you're recommending.
Okay.
We would need to be more specific than that.
Well, there was a letter regarding the culverts.
So the suggested motion that Councillor Tingley may want to make would be move that staff write a letter to the province of Nova Scotia requesting inspection and capital replacement and repair as needed on cross culverts across Highway 2 between the communities of Enfield and Elmsdale, with staff to go into further detail as possible. Motion 1. Motion 2, if, I don't know if you'd wanted,
If you've got that, you didn't write that down? Well, I've got parts of it written
I
down.
did. I've got it.
She's got it, she can give it to you.
I've got it.
Is that good enough? Okay, well, I'm gonna move
That one.
what Jesse's talked about, the letter, move the staff write a letter to the province requesting inspection of the culverts along Highway number 2 and capital funding.
And include recommendations for capital replacement where needed and maintenance as required and more immediately.
Right. And that's
Through the communities of Enfield through to Shubenacadie along Highway 2.
That would be my first motion then.
Okay, do we have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor McPhee. Councillor Rhino. Oops, sorry, I have to.
Thank you, Madam Warden. Yeah, I understand the motion, but to ask for a check of culverts and do that just on the number 2, I do believe that it should be the entire municipality. Why should we just inspect culverts on the number 2 when there's other areas in the number? There's a 14, there's a 202, 215, and other ones that could benefit from an inspection and a list, and if we're gonna go down that route. So I think this really is, I'd rather see it expanded. Thank you.
So, okay, folks, we're not going to get into a large debate tonight in business from councillors from this. This was why I suggested a report or working with staff individually, because we could be here till midnight. It's not that it's not important, but staff have not come prepared to do all these things, and it's creating things on the fly. So go ahead, Councillor Tingley.
Well, I was just going to say something similar to that. Like, we're here tonight, my talk is about Robert Scott, and it probably is equally important to look at some of this other stuff. But, you know, this is the one item that and I've got other areas, even in my district, that I think need to be looked at. But this is an area that I've been asked to come back by people. It's the only area that people ask me to come back and talk to council. And hopefully we can get this motion.
Thank you. Councillor Mitchell.
Yeah, just a quick question to Jesse. When you mention maintenance, does that mean moving of debris like trees and branches and et cetera, that are in that drainage?
Through you, Madam Warden. Yes, so I specifically focused on debris. Soil buildup debris and vegetation that's blocking or inhibiting the capacity of the cross culverts. And just to provide context, it's very specific because staff is reviewing draft information on very specific areas. So at a high level, based on the information I was reading before this meeting started, I've got likely 4 cross culvert replacement recommendations and 10 to 13 debris recommendations at very specific locations. And that's what we're going at. That's why I was going after, because I've got information in hand, and it's not a go check everything. It's check exactly this. And I do have that information available, which makes it actionable. And that's why I'm recommending it. As other things come up, we can absolutely address them. There's just an opportunity because there's information at hand. That's the context.
I'm satisfied, Madam Chair, with that answer.
Any further comments or questions on the motion? Question's been called. No, only one motion has been made, and it is passed unanimously.
Okay, so we talked about that one motion so long. I know the second motion's got to do with CN. Writing CN a letter.
Through Madam Warden, the potential motion for council to consider, if Councillor Tingley wanted to make it, would be to move to write a letter to CN, copying the appropriate governing jurisdictions or bodies to review the capacity and structural integrity of culverts underneath the CN rail adjacent to the Shubenacadie River and beside Highway 2, with focus on their ability to respond to 1 in 5 year storms and 1 in 100 year storms. That would be the motion to consider.
I think I've got most of that. Do you want me to read it out again, or do you have it?
I think I have it.
Okay.
Move that council directs staff to write a letter to CN Rail copying the appropriate governing bodies to review the capacity and integrity of culverts under the rail adjacent to the Shubenacadie River and beside Highway 2 with a focus on the ability to respond to 1 in 5 year storms and 1 in 100 year storms.
That's it.
Are you making that motion,
I'm making that
Counselor?
motion, yeah.
Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor McPhee. Councillor Rhino. I'll take a minute.
I'll support the motion, but I would assume that after the incident in Millbrook there, that knowing CN, that they will be doing an evaluation of all culverts under the CN line. So that would be my expectation.
Councillor Musa.
Thank you, Madam Warden. I'm not familiar with the subdivision, but does it always flood or just recently?
So Robert Scott Drive has been prone to some flooding, backyard mostly, housing not. I'm not as familiar with house flooding. This was much more extreme than I've ever heard of on Robert Scott Drive. Backyards, absolutely. And what's going on there is there's the brook behind the subdivision isn't Barney's Brook. Barney's Brook's further upstream. I can't remember the name. It's like Black Iron Brook, or regardless, there's a small brook that comes in behind, and then they come together right before the crossing of the CN rail. So it's a catalyst point of water accumulating, and there's only one crossing point at that location. So it does fill up there consistently. Water, it is in that property. So the municipal land itself is underwater regularly. That's not irregular, but it getting back up to Robert Scott Drive is irregular. So, and just for information, there's actually 6 crossings in that area within the motion that staff are targeting. There's 6 specific crossings that our letter will focus on. Which includes that one at Robert Scott Drive.
Well, I can tell you every culvert in the province have failed. Everything is washed out on East Uniacke, South Uniacke, everything, everywhere. So it was not a usual storm, and I hope it doesn't come back. But I don't know what to do, like, for now. Thank you.
Any further questions on the motion? Question's been called. The motion is passed unanimously. Anything further, Counselor Tingley?
No, just to say I'm sorry for tying up council's time so much here tonight. I appreciate what staff have done here, and sorry to be pestering the CAO so much this week, but I really appreciate it all. And I think council's doing a fine job, staff's doing a good job here, and I really appreciate this.
Counselor Musa.
Thank you, Madam Warden. I know it was a tough storm. I know we got a lot of water. It's an act of God, and I want to commend for my resident in Mount Uniac. They all tough it up, clean their basements, contact their insurance if they have insurance. If they don't, nobody complained. I didn't hear one single complaint from them. And I think the province have a big job to do, a lot of work on their culvert because everything was washed out. Like even the ditch by the business park, it took off over there and washed the road like both sides. We're not talking about like a river or a crossing or just a ditch overflow, and it was 10 inches of water on Highway 1 going down to the pub. So it wasn't usual, and I want to thank all my residents for doing what they should do and tough it up. Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Green.
Well, just a couple of things. First and foremost, this Saturday is the Walton Field Day. If anybody's interested, there's events on there all day, a supper, music, games, a chance, an auction. So if anybody's interested, it's down there. I believe it starts at around 10 o'clock. There's no street parade this year in Walton. There's not.
Is there a breakfast?
I don't believe there was a breakfast this year. Secondly, District 6, we fared very lucky in this. We didn't have a lot of damage. No, we didn't, which is very fortunate. But I also want to send out condolences to all affected by the loss of the people in West Hants. But I want to take a minute and just reflect on the first responders that responded there at 1 o'clock in the morning and what they were faced with, the unbelievable. There's no way to train for this. Departments were there with boats. Walton Fire went out about 2:30 with their boat, worked tirelessly all night and into the day. But this is totally different scenarios than what you train for on the ocean. No, it is. And everybody just take a minute and think of the first responders and what they saw, what they done, what they achieved. No, it is. We owe them a great deal of thanks. They done yeoman service, and these were a lot of outfits that never even had worked together before. It was, and they done the impossible. Well, they did. So anyway, those are my comments.
Thank you. Deputy Warden.
Thank you, Madam Warden. I'll go through it quickly. Attended Tide Fest with my family, ran into Councillor Mitchell and Councillor Sandra Garden-Cole, as well as the MLA, John McDonald there. Seemed to be a good time had by all, best we could. Also had a little visit with the CAO. Stepped in for the warden with a meeting with NSFM and the Minister of Municipal Affairs on the service exchange coming up. Councilors will notice you've had meeting requests for the consultation period coming up in the month of August. Also called into the UARB hearing to see how that went. Attended the CCRA meeting. Had a phone call with Sergeant Scott McRae dealing with speeding and ATV use in Mount Uniac. I'm told the RCMP are going to be reaching out to the families and the individuals who are operating the ATVs just to remind them what the rules of the road are and what safety operation of them is. So hopefully that will quell the catwalking down the middle of the road for kilometers on end being filmed by their own parents and posted on social media. Couple things looking at. One one of the biggest things that's come out of even before the storm that was requested to me by a resident is cell phone coverage throughout the Hants County and into the rural parts of the province. Especially in times of emergencies, the cell network gets overrun, and in many areas of Hants County, there is no cell service or very, very poor cell service. So I'd like to bring a motion forward that staff engage, before I put the motion, similar to how we lobbied for high-speed internet to be brought to the rural area. The intent of this motion is to lobby for better cell coverage for the rural area throughout the whole municipality. That staff engage the appropriate channels to request the province and cell phone carriers review how to bring better service to the rural area. I so move.
We have a seconder, seconded by Councillor Garden Cole. Is there any discussion on the motion? Question's been called. And the motion is passed unanimously.
That brings the end to what I'm going to bring forward tonight. The other issues we can address in September. I just want to also put out there to echo what Councillor Green said. The first responders were faced with new challenges, going above and beyond. I think this is going to highlight some things for future training opportunities and communication or cooperation between departments. And I fully think that that's going to be a good thing. Again, heart goes out to those in West Hants who suffered tragedy and who've been affected. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McPhee.
Thank you, Warden. Just to get back to something a little more happy times, I guess, was the Canada Day heydays, which the Warden attended. Thanks very much. And we make it next year. I'll take a car that's not quite prone to overheating. And
I wasn't going to mention that.
by 390 got up to 265 degrees, and I said, we got to leave the parade. We can't stay here. And the Warden noticed that there was smoke starting to come up around it. It was the oil burning off the engine, so no harm done.
I wasn't going to mention that.
When people say that the new cars aren't like the old cars, they're right. But anyway, it was great that we got to pull it off because everybody knows what the weather was leading up to it. It caused us a lot of problems. But on Thursday, we just made the decision to go. Things worked out fairly well. A lot of people, the parade was well attended, as was the car show. And everybody seemed to have a very good time. It was a great fireworks display later. Pangea played there. People found it very entertaining. They again did a bang-up job in that. And I'd like to thank Ralph Ballum for providing at the last minute our stage, getting the stairs built. Great effort by Ralph and his family to help us out there. Yes, and of course, I also attended the CCRCE busing policy meeting, which was good because certainly every district, I think, has concerns, so it was nice to be able to talk to them and get a little bit of a better understanding of their side of things. Oh, yes, and I did view the presentation to the UARB on our district boundaries or borders. Very well presented, seemed to be positively received by the adjudicators, so I hope that's a go. And further to Councillor Tingley's concerns on Robert Scott Drive, I know that Jesse's well aware of my request for backup generators or solar power generators for areas in the Shubenacadie. So yeah, that's an ongoing thing. I hope we can get a solution to those lift stations when power goes out so people don't get flooded out, the same people over and over. And with the CN Railroad, I hope the culvert near Densmore Road is also one that you're thinking of there because it acts as a very good dam, saves everybody on my side of the CN rail, but it certainly floods everybody out on the other side. So hopefully they can, I think some maintenance also, historically there's a problem there. But anyway, I'll leave it at that. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Counselor Hale.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of things. I also attended the Heydays, the parade. My GM only get up to 220 in the parade, so I did all right. Yeah, I was very well attended, very well organized in a short time there, and it's noted by many people in the car enthusiasts that it is one of the best shows in Nova Scotia. So kudos to the people who put it on. Also attended the grand opening of the Novice Glass Repair Shop up here in the park. Pretty good turnout there, and it was great to meet the staff there. And they do motor vehicles repair and replace, and they also have a lot of accessories there for the cars too. So if you get a chance to drop in, I'm sure you'll be very well provided with the information. And I want to send kudos out to the Nima River Volunteer Fire Department and the East Hants Ground Search and Rescue. They looked after the two campgrounds in Nima River, Riverland and Renfrew Camping, and the estimated was that they shuttled about 100 people out of the campground that day. They got the call at 4:30 in the morning, and they worked at it all day. And I know it was quite hectic at times working between the two campgrounds, but they did an excellent job and do so. And of course, they were looking for boats, and they ended up 2 residents had boats there. They provided that, and they got another one from Bible Hill to help with that too. And just to note, I've counted, I think it was 16 vehicles out on flat decks the last 2 days, and 1 ATV that apparently got flooded and couldn't get out, so they had to get out on flat decks. So kudos to those 2 organizations, and I'm very glad that they did what they could, and it just goes to show us how important our first responders really are just in our own communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Eisner.
Thank you, Madam Warden. Just, my first job was to go to the H building. We had to pick recipients for the bursary, so there were 6 applicants, so we had to scale it down to 3. But all the kids that went to the school there, so picked out 2, they each got $1,000 each. It just, yeah, to pick the new cleaner for the building. It was kind of interesting how they do it. It's very professional.
For which building, Counselor?
E.H. Horn building.
Ah.
So they got their new contractor. Did with the bus meeting too with the provincial government. I guess they're gonna straighten some of that stuff out, presume. Hats off to DOT. They got one of my roads fixed, or Monte Vista Road. They got that up and running on Sunday morning. So still had to do a lot of work to it. But I'm just wondering, they got the other road going to Nama River. They done that maybe 2 days later, but we still have a road that's blocked off, Renfrew Road. That's the only one that hasn't been addressed yet.
Is it blocked or is it accessible? Or?
No, people have to go around.
Well, but they do have a way in and out.
Yeah, I just don't know what is the time frame on that, because
I'm sure there are many that are waiting. I think their priority was certainly roads where there was only one exit in and out.
okay, just thought maybe you didn't know if we could tell some people when they could go get it fixed. Did have the FedEx truck go through it. It wasn't supposed to, wasn't supposed to move the barrier.
Jesse, did you have any information on
that? Yes, through you, Madam Warden. Just a reminder for the public for provincial road closure updates. The province is requesting everyone look up 511. It's the website, and it maps all the current road statuses, and it's very current. I've been checking it frequently. It's 511, the numbers, .novascotia.ca. And that website has been very handy on seeing the status of what roads are still out, which ones are opening, and as soon as they open back up, it's been updating on the website. So if folks are concerned out there in the public and not sure if the routes are open, the suggestion would be go to that provincial resource, check the route that you're planning to travel in advance, and then have some secure peace of mind before you leave the house driving around.
Thanks, Jess.
At all, Counselor?
Yes.
Counselor Mitchell?
Thank you, Madam Warden. A fairly busy July. I attended the hiring immigrants presentation at the Sportsplex put on by the Chamber of Commerce. I attended a Zoom meeting on policing, policy on policing, put on by the NSFM. I signed some papers for the library board at the Elmsted Library and also did a photo. I attended the busing discussion with Gary Adams from CCRCE. Spent some time at the Tide Fest and saw some local councilors and CAO. Attended the UARB hearing on boundary review. Very professional staff, and I enjoyed following along, even though I couldn't comment. It was still interesting. On the 22nd and the 23rd, this past weekend, I visited business and residents impacted by the rain across from Elmsted Lumber and also on Elmwood Drive. I was talking to Mr. Wilbur from Elmsted Lumber about the size of piping that runs through their property, which takes the water from the subdivision that goes under Elmwood Drive. It didn't seem to be big enough, so it backed up and came down the ditch on my side, and we ended up getting some water in our back basement down through the swale. The second item dealt with the backup on the number 2, where it wasn't draining fast enough, and it came up on the left side going out and covered the roadway, and which was impeding traffic coming and going from Elmwood. A truck can get through, but some of the cars that were low couldn't get out, and since there's only one exit, that was the discussion from the people about the second exit, and that was the reason it came up with the newsletter from Kathy McDonald. Had a call from a resident dealing with ATVs, and the question was, and through you to staff, does the municipality have bylaws that match the province so they can access municipal roads to get to trails? The province has their rules and regulations, but they couldn't find any from the municipality that match.
Through Madam Warden, could you repeat that again?
The province has rules and regulations for ATVs to travel on the side of the roads to get to trails on provincial roads, but the question is, does the municipality have rules traveling on municipal roads that match the province?
Through you, Madam Warden, currently there isn't rules. However, on municipal roads, however, it's a public road, and so anything under the Motor Vehicle Act would also apply to all public roads. And so that governing, so the police, if that they would follow what they're able to, or it would be enabled as per what's in the Motor Vehicle Act with respect to ATV legislation.
Okay, I guess the request was, we're hoping that municipality would accept or adopt the bylaws and rules that the province has, so they could travel from along the highways to roadways to get to the trails.
I think with the provincial act, that municipal roads are already covered by that. There's no specific permission.
Is that correct?
Is that correct, Jesse?
Through Madam Warden, staff could check and respond via memo to council just to verify that at a later
Counselor
date.
Hebb says he may have some information that would be helpful.
Thank you, Warden. Yes. Rules and regulations of the Motor Vehicle Act covers all provincial roads, municipal roads, and all the roads like that. They do not have jurisdiction on the roads whatsoever. There are 9 pilot projects which has been approved. They just haven't gone through legislation where ATVs are allowed to use shoulder travel. One of those is in Hants County at Maitland, Walton. Other than that, it hasn't gone through legislation yet, but they are still allowed to use shoulder travel. But no, they're not allowed in any provincial or municipal roads.
The pilot project ends in October of this year.
It's supposed to be going through legislation in October.
Yeah.
It's being held up now because of the rules and regulations. They've decided to make some changes at the very last minute, which is not unusual. So hopefully by October, they're still allowed on the pilot projects. They're still going to be ongoing even after October.
Okay. And the last item, I walked the CN tracks this morning looking for the culvert that drains the water from Elmwood Drive under from Elmsted Lumber to, which heads to the river under the train tracks. We found the culvert, but there was very little movement on either side of either side of the train tracks. The river was flowing very quickly, and somebody went up in a sea-doo, but there was very little movement coming under the culvert. Either that hit blockage or vegetation was slowing it down. I stood for a minute, and I think when the leaves moved, maybe an inch in that minute. So, and we couldn't get down to check if he was blocked, but if that's one of the ones you're looking at, I appreciate that. And that's all, Madam Chair, and thank you. Finally, I want to thank Elmsted Fire Department for doing their due diligence and pumping out basements and helping out the businesses as much as they could.
Counselor Garden Cole.
Thank you, Madam Warden. District 1 has been very busy this past month with a lot with construction, traffic interruption issues, which have recently been resolved, but it was a really long month for residents traveling on the number 2. More recently, issues with flooding, obviously, from last weekend. The majority of people's flooding issues were just due to extreme weather, and as Councillor Musa said, I felt like residents really toughed it out and were neighborly to each other and just trying to get through it. A number of residents have concerns about their ditches needing to be dug out and drainage not properly, but that's par for the course, and legitimate concerns about that. So I support any correspondence between the province and the municipality regarding mitigation going forward. I think that that's something that the province has to look at, and in conjunction with the municipalities, how we can find our way forward in this, in what potentially could be the new norm, for weather events. And I really support the idea of putting information out there to residents about how to help themselves. I mean, we there's only so much that can be done, but like I'm thinking backflow valves and all kinds of things that I never thought of before, that now I'm that's at the forefront of my mind because I got water in my basement too. So I did the July 1st festivities and fireworks, which were great. Up in Shubenacadie, we always go. The CCRCE meeting about the buses, which, is at the forefront of my concerns. I think that busing is paramount for children. It doesn't matter how far away they are. This is a very busy municipality now, and what used to seem like it was okay isn't okay anymore. And I think that busing should be provided for kids to schools in this municipality, just like teachers need to be provided to teach the classrooms. I think that busing is that important. I don't think it should be an option, and I think they need to work through their operational issues to make that happen. Finally, I just want to express my sympathy to everyone who suffered hardship during this flooding. Appreciation to the to the first responders and to everyone who helped out people in distress. And most importantly, my deepest condolences to the families of those who actually lost their lives in this tragic event. So that's it from District 1. Thank you.
Councilor Rhino.
Thank you, Madam Warden. During the month, I presented 2 80th birthday certificates, one to a Julia Holt of Selma, and one to a Lyman Bus Withrow Machine Shop, and we had a dance and party, which was well attended, and a good time was had by all. Another part of the month was, as you yourself mentioned, we had a meeting with CAO, myself, and the warden with the few possible new replacement for Staff Sergeant, the RCMP. This was a really forward event, and I must say, I think it's brought upon by the municipality on what a relationship we've created with the RCMP, and I think it's noticed by the hierarchy in the RCMP, or we wouldn't have had this meeting. So I think East Hants is a leader with regard to that and heading into our 24-hour policing. So we are being recognized in that. I'd like to, as Councillor Green mentioned, I would like to compliment all the first responders in East and West Hants who had to deal with the issues that revolved around Friday evening, Saturday morning. Exceptional job was done, heroic things were done, and will probably go unnoticed by a lot of people. My heart goes out to the families who lost loved ones in West Hants area. I read the obituary of a young girl, 7-year-old girl, this morning, and it pretty near brought me to tears. It was touching, and you just can imagine we can replace roads, but we can't replace lives. So we got to keep that in mind. Having said that, the 215 took an awful wallop Saturday morning. I was on the phone with CAO a lot. There was a number of issues, and since I've been on the phone with numerous phone calls, it has inconvenienced a lot of people with a round trip of that used to be, in some cases, 20 minutes, gone up to an hour or more. Contingency plans was made with the fire department for both fire service on each side of the affected area. It was done. RCMP, their contingency really wasn't affected because they could approach from the Rawdon office. So we didn't get much change there. But my concerns run around EHS. I was told by EMO officials that EHS could not come up with a contingency plan in that area. They could not put an ambulance in the affected area due to the fact that they don't have enough staff. I want to point out that some time ago, we had an ambulance station in the Kennebunk area, which served the entire area, the Hants North and surrounding areas. That was taken out, and now we're back to having the ambulances come a long distance, or from Milford at least, if an ambulance is there, or Truro. Well, that now, when they get there, to return to the hospital with a patient has been severely affected and made longer. And I'm very scared in a life-threatening situation, this could end up in a grave consequence. I don't know what we can do about it. They say they don't have enough people and equipment to do that. I have to take them at the word. But it just brings me concern that when events like this happen, it puts people at peril. And I guess that's, for me, I guess that's all. And I hope everybody has a good summer vacation. Thank you.
Councilors, before we adjourn, I do have an item, a couple of things I want to bring before you. One, you have approved my membership in the Atlantic Mayors Congress, and I've been attending those meetings since then. Meetings I've attended thus far, I've been able to drive to, one in Shediac, one in Amherst. The next one is in Happy Valley, Goose Bay. I can't drive to Happy Valley, Goose Bay. So I'm not comfortable. It's going to be significantly more expensive than attending the ones I drove to in Amherst and Shediac. And also, the Atlantic Mayors Congress has issued invitations for CAOs to attend these conferences as well. But I did not feel comfortable. It's in the vicinity, airfare, hotel, and everything would be approaching around $2,400. And I don't feel comfortable without council's blessing of attending that conference and spending that amount of money. There is some money in the budget, and there is money in reserves for FCM and SFM and conference like that, more than enough for both the CAO and I to attend, and there still be a healthy reserve. But I guess I just wanted to get councilors' view on whether or not it was okay if you would bless my attendance and if you would bless the attendance of the CAO if she were able to go. And I felt it important to ask that since it's a little different. Councilor Mitchell.
Thank you, Madam Warden. I'll move that the costs related to your travel for you and the CEO be covered by any expenses that need to be covered by council.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Question's been called.
Hot air balloon.
The motion has passed unanimously, and I do thank council for that, but I just simply was not comfortable when it was so much more than the other conferences had been. And also, just before we adjourn, I joined in those councilors in sending my heartfelt thanks to all the first responders who did so much and who always do so much in times of emergency. They're not safe in their homes with their families. They're at times, and especially this time, operating at great personal risk to help others. And these are volunteer people, and I can't thank them enough. I'd also, we haven't mentioned here, with all the other losses, the loss of our pool is certainly going to impact the entire community for some time going forward. And I'd also like to acknowledge all the staff who turned out on that stormy night. Water and wastewater people went nonstop for I don't know how many days. The communication staff who were on deck. The staff who secured the pool and other recreation facilities. The CAO came back early from her vacation to be on deck. And the waste management folks for solid waste so that we could keep the landfill so that people can have a place to take their stuff. So, I don't mean to forget any staff member, all the directors of their departments and all the staff of the municipality who were called on certainly went above and beyond the call of duty. Our EMO, Kelly, she was supposed to be on vacation. And anyway, so I think I just want to say kudos to staff and thank you very much for everything you did and everything you do. It is recognized and it's greatly appreciated. Thank you. So, Deputy Warden.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We're not meeting again until September. There is a consultation portion coming for the new memorandum of understanding between municipalities and the province. And those meetings, I believe, CAO, do you want to take that? Thank you.
Through you, Madam Warden, the Alana did send out invitations to each one of the consultation meetings that is being held throughout August. Due to the timing of provincial legislation needing to go through the House, the consultation being in August is not ideal. However, there are a number of sessions that you can attend. My understanding is that we will get the sort of the East Hants snapshot a couple of days before the first round of consultations, the first, and they're all virtual, so you can attend whichever one you like. So what I will do when we get those is I'll do some interpretation and send those out to council by email, just so you're prepared before you walk into a consultation with the information that you'll need. And I think the province talked last night on a call with the wardens, CAOs and mayors, that they were going to send out some supplementary information on sort of the new calculation for standard expenditures and that type of thing. So when we get those, Wade and I will work on interpreting those for you and sending them out so you have that information beforehand. My understanding is that unless these consultations go completely south, the intention is to try and get this through the House in the fall. And that way we can have legislation ready and new for next year. So there has been a committee that has done a lot of work to get this to the point that it's at. I think East Hants will fare fairly well in the discussions, yet to be seen, but initial indications would be that. So I will endeavor, I'm actually on vacation the next couple of weeks, but when that comes in, we'll make sure we get that to you, if not before the first one, because there's only 2 days. It'll be before the second consultation meeting for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, CAO. And I was on that meeting for the warden that night, and there was a lot of concern about some of the items brought up during that meeting, some of the things that when you see the presentation, which has been emailed out to everybody today by NSFM, there's a Schedule A of items they're going to talk about in the future and things they're going to address. I would really recommend everybody looking at that. I know August is normally our month that we try to take a bit of a breath and spend a little more time with our families and communities, but this is the first time the MOU has been looked at in 28 years. So this is the first update for 28 years on the understanding. So the better we understand it and the better we ask the right questions during this consultation period, both for the committee, NSFM, and directly to the province, the better the outcome will be for the municipalities as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Warden. Seeing nothing else on the agenda, I would be looking for a motion to establish the time and dates for the next council meeting, which is September the 7th, 2023, Special Executive Committee meeting of PAC, and I believe that's if necessary. Is that correct? Yes. September 19th, 2023, regular meeting of Council for Policy and in-camera items, and September 27th, 2023, regular meeting of Council. Someone prepared to move those dates? Moved by Councillor Tingley, seconded. Councillor Musa. All those in favor?
Aye.
Contrary? Motion is carried. I would now be looking for a motion to adjourn. Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Contrary? Motion is carried. We are adjourned. Thank you very much, folks, and enjoy your